Yes. Hello, and welcome to the Lit podcast. I am so excited to be with you. You're probably wondering who I am and where's your normal host and what is going on. Here's what's going to happen. It's a family affair. My name is Dr. Diepiriye Kuku. You can call me Diepiriye or you can call me Dr. Kuku. One of the two. But tonight, we are going to live out loud. We're going to live intentionally. We're going to live with purpose. And my cousin has invited me on to discuss a topic that we have discussed endlessly together in family gatherings. And we've spoken about getting together at some point to have some cousin-to-cousin time to talk about different aspects of emotional intelligence. Now, I know that is a large part of what this podcast is about, is how to live with intention using your own emotional intelligence. I've been watching all through, and I know it's one of the strongest themes that you have. And so your host, Juana, has invited me to come speak about a few topics of which I'm very passionate. One of them, of course, is our neurodiversity. Neurodiversity. If you don't know what that means, we're going to get to it. And another is empathy. It's a topic that I know that a lot of you are interested in. Now, if you'd like to join the discussion, if you'd like to be on, please remember to allow this platform, StreamYard, to give it permission to access your camera and your microphone. Remember, with all the security protocols that we have, we're really fortunate that our gadgets make sure that we give each and every program or app that wants to use our locations, our microphones, and our cameras, that we have to give them permission. So I'm so proud to say that if you want to join us, then please do give StreamYard permission to use your video and your camera. So good evening, welcome. I see that we have a few people signed on. Again, if you have any parts of the discussion that you'd like to join, particularly as we go along, do feel free to type in your questions. I appreciate it also that you can, if you want to speak, give access to your camera and your microphone, because it would be really good to hear from everyone out in cyberspace. Now, while we're getting ready here, I'll just introduce a little bit about myself. My name is Diepiriye, and the reason why I'm here and the reason why I'm so excited to be on the Lit podcast with you is that, I've been a fan for a long time, and I really appreciate that we speak about these topics, but also it's a part of my work. I'm a sociologist by training, and I'm a university lecturer by experience now. It's the most current version of my career that I've been doing for over a decade now. And I have other versions of my career path that I will be sharing a little bit as we go through tonight's session about neurodiversity. You already know, I hope you have some burning questions or burning things to share about neurodiversity and our own interactions with the neurodiversity in our world. And again, the reason why I think it's so important is that we do experience neurodiversity already. So it's not anything that will be new or let's say out of the box for anyone. Perhaps the ways that we will talk about or think about it that might make us feel a bit more connected to this topic. And the other aspect of it is empathy, of course. Now, you've heard words like compassion, sympathy. We'll get to how and what and when and why is it important. So without further ado, I would like to welcome your host.
Hey.
Welcome. So nice to
what
finally be on
doing
your
here?
podcast.
You took over.
I took over. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming, Diepiriye. And you guys, hey mama, hey Demond. So thank you for introducing yourself, because normally, y'all, we are normally virtual, right? And we are not virtual, and it's hot up here. Because my cousin, hi, y'all. So you have had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Diepiriye Kuku. Mm-hmm. And so you told him who you were, right?
A little bit. Just a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know what to tell them. Who am I? Because otherwise I'm just some dude on your sofa.
Right. Then they're probably like, who is that? Hey, Michelle. Michelle actually got to meet him earlier today. So
wow, that was Michelle.
Okay. That was Michelle. The cake lady. She was on here. She was like one of the first people. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I know that Diepiriye told y'all that we were going to be talking about neurodiversity. What in the world? That's a big old sciencey word, right?
Chop it down.
Chop it down. Okay. But did you tell them what you do?
I didn't have much. I said that I'm currently a university lecturer. That was all I said.
Where you live? Tell them where you live.
I live with my husband, like you do.
Right. I love his husband, by the way, y'all. Like, I feel like we look pale for some reason. I don't know if I changed the light, y'all. Sorry.
To make it warmer.
Yeah.
Bring out a glow.
Yeah, because I need a glow.
And you can come closer. I feel like I have half the screen.
I guess that was it.
That was the warm.
That was the warm. I guess I'm just pale. But so you don't want to tell them where you live?
I do. I live in a town called Northampton. It is 1 hour north of England, north of London, and it is smack in the middle between Oxford and Cambridge. So I live in the UK. And I've lived there since 2011. I always remember when I moved there, because I just finished my dissertation. We were moving from India. We moved from India that March. But I also remember 2011 because there were race riots in the UK. And many people across the UK and America, we're cousins. These two cultures are cousins. And I just remember thinking, oh, okay, I see, I recognize what's going on here. It's like we have, so-called race riots here too. And also, there was a killing of a young Black man by the hands of the police. And so,
like right when you had first gotten there?
That was one of the things I believe that sparked that riot. If I'm not mistaken. I know it's more convoluted than that, and I'm sure you guys can Google it and correct me, but it was something about that. And I mentioned that because there was a man called Stephen Lawrence. He was killed by the police in the late 90s, I believe. But his mother has become an activist. And you know that post Trayvon Martin and the list of names, one of the things that we got to know about were the mothers of those young people who had really brought their images to our public consciousness and made us keep saying their names. And so Stephen Lawrence's mother in the UK, she did something very similar. Doreen Lawrence, and she is our university. I work for the University of Northampton. That's what I do. I teach business sustainability. And we awarded her an honorary degree. And my university it used to be primarily white. Yeah. And over the 10 years that I've been there, it's become darker. I'll just say that.
Okay.
And so I remember sitting there on stage because, when we give with graduation, the teachers sit there on stage with our Harry Potter hats.
Yeah.
With our Harry Potter hats. And I just remember because I didn't know that she was being honored.
Oh, okay.
And so here I am sitting here, one of few people, like Raisin and Milk. And I was like, oh, look. And she gave a whole speech, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, look at us.
Wait, you really just said like Raisin and Milk? Y'all, I have to just tell y'all that when we get together, we have lots of fun. We have some really intense conversations. It's not going to be that intense right now, but it gets deep, but it's because like he was saying, I heard him earlier, like he's passionate about it, and y'all know how passionate I am about mental health. And so Diepiriye has a master's in public health, and your doctorate is in sociology.
Yep.
Yeah. So his doctorate is in sociology. So I want to start out by us talking about that. Like, so psychology, right? That's me. Oh, y'all, you hear the thunder? And sociology, him. So what, in your words, what's the difference between sociology and psychology? Because people probably have had to take maybe take a sociology class in college if they did, or maybe became familiar with it in high school. Everybody seems to know psychology, but we don't really talk so much about sociology.
And we had to take, of course, psychology courses in my public health degree. And, some of the most interesting courses, my focus was on communication and international health. But the options that I took are about mental health, for example. You guys, unfortunately, because of Katrina, you would have heard that Louisiana, the New Orleans, I did my master's at Tulane. So it has one of the biggest public health facilities in the country after New York City.
Oh, wow.
It has the second largest public hospital in the country. And of course, many of you would have heard of it because of Katrina, because they got left there.
No comment.
No comment.
No comment.
But our professor, our mental, the professor was teaching us about mental health. One of the things that she says to answer your question is the difference between public health and medicine. Is a similar difference between psychology and sociology is that we think of a medical doctor that heals or looks after an individual's body, whereas now we can see that with public health, like with the spread of disease, public health looks after a community. And so similarly, a psychologist looks after the mental well-being of an individual, whereas a sociologist looks after the mental state of a community. So you have like the Chicago School of Public Health, the Chicago School of Sociology, and that thread more so looks at statistics about societies, statistics about communities, and then you have the complete at the other extreme, which is what I did, the ethnographers. So we use personal life stories and personal histories of individuals within communities, and then we use that to tell the story about a community.
Okay. So I'm sure like when my grandchildren are older, we'll be in all that history for real with all this pandemic that we just got through. And so when you think about that, like for me, what's coming up right now is like, okay, we just went through this whole pandemic, and now what they calling it a tri-pandemic or something, triple pandemic. I don't know, because there's a lot. I think there's flu, COVID, and monkeypox. Oh Lord! So it's like a whole bunch of stuff. And I think a lot of kids are getting RSV, which is respiratory syncytial virus, or syncytial virus. But anyway, but children can die from that. I just want to put that out there. So when you look at that from a public health perspective, which you have background in as well. So there's a public health, that's the problem because you have all these diseases, right? That people are dying and being like, they're spreading fast in a sense. Then you look at your community from the sociology perspective, how the spread of the disease, hence social distancing, right? But then I look at it from a mental health perspective, because how many of you, like just thinking about it, how many of you live alone, right? Or you live with just your partner and y'all are stuck in the house. You can't go anywhere. And you're usually out and about traveling and all that kind of stuff. So think about how that affects your psyche, your mental, right? And so, but for the state of culture, community, it's best to not be out and about, right? So hence the social part. So, I mean, that's just what's kind of coming up for me, like thinking of how it's all interconnected in a way.
COVID, I think, really brought, it brought mental health to the fore for a lot of people. Just the simple fact of being isolated and having to come to terms with one's own isolation. What do I do in my isolation? I was watching one of my favorite new comedians, Yvonne Orji from... I love her. You love her? She is great. What's the show? Insecure. And she was saying that she didn't have any hobbies. She's from also my father's Nigerian, and a bit of understanding of that achievement focus that many immigrant communities and Nigerians, and there are certain immigrant communities that are really achievement focused. And she realized that she had no hobbies. Like she literally didn't know how to be alone with herself, could not sit still, and yet that was exactly what COVID asked everyone to do. Pause.
Right. You know that you mentioned that one of the people, I'm gonna shout out somebody real quick, a person that I've virtually become connected with. Like, I don't think we've ever met person to person, but like, she's on my stuff, I'm on her, you know what I mean? So her name's Jaquela Lynn, by the way, and she just did a video because she packed up her family. They went in an RV and since last June. And so she's riding around, and I just listened to this today, but she was talking about that same thing, pause, that she was kind of meditating and being in silence where she is right now in the mountains in California. And she was like, God, what am I supposed to do? Like, what do you want me to do? Because she's a very busy person and she's doing a lot. And he said, pause, be still. And that resonated with me so much, just because we came to this whole standstill of like life, right? But now that things are open and people are like, oh, let's get back. But it's like, maybe we're still supposed to kind of be a little bit, you know, not just rush right into things, but you know what I mean? Like, just jump right back in. But
because we have the pause and we understand a bit of taking things step by step, going a bit slower, valuing the relationships that we had. Because remember, you know, something I mentioned, one of my favorite podcasts from NPR is called Hidden Brain, and they literally just talk about the brain, people's inner and outer social worlds. And one of the episodes was about those loose social connections that we all lost during COVID. The male person, the mail carrier, the garbage people that you might see once a week and might wave to if you're at home and during those hours, like I used to be growing up. I knew the garbage people. The person who's always at the place where you buy gas, where you buy groceries, where you get your prescription filled, all those loose connections. If you catch public transportation, maybe you see the same people on your bus or on your subway, however you get to work. And those, because we lost those, we started to understand how valuable they were. So just the other day, I was walking in Walmart, and I don't live here, mind you, but this is the South, and people more easily talk to people. I'm chatty. I'm chatty. So I was walking in Walmart, and the greeter at Walmart is like, "Hey, da 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 da," just a really friendly greeting. And she said to her coworker, "He's the one that always comes in and looks nice and smells good." And I was like, "Oh, okay,
that's me, right?"
But again, you know, even though many people perceive me as a confident person, I think if I am confident, it's because I freely interact with people. I give compliments as easily as I receive them. And just that day, that really pumped me up. Really pumped me up just to say, hey, you know what? You look good. I compliment people. This is Southern boy in me that I just freely compliment people. But now that we had that pause from the everyday compliments that we may see, because I know I come from a big family. I know there are people who will not waste an outfit. They will leave a funeral and go to the store just because their outfit can't be wasted. If I'm dressed up and I already look this good, I may as well just.
That is too funny.
But because we know that there are these little reasons why we might just say, hey girl, I really like your hair today. Oh, did you do something new? We miss those connections. And those connections, now that sociologists reading the work of psychologists have said, you know what, this really applies. Let me test it. And people have seen that those loose connections over a lifetime really matter. When you're older and you're not working anymore, who's still there? Your family, your friends, and those loose connections. Because our coworkers are a major group that we see regularly.
Right. So they're taken away, and you don't, that's how you can kind of get hermit mode, right?
Yes.
So when you're just thinking about like how these loose connections, because I think this is a great segue in the social part for us to talk about the neurodiversity, because we have all these loose social connections, as the doctor said, right? So how does that really, like, okay, let me back up. So then there's social media, right? So we have these, I I guess, tighter social connections because people are, on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, retweeting, reposting, resharing, doing all that kind of stuff, right? So, I think I didn't mute my phone somewhere. But so where, like, how does that fit in? Because there's the social parts of social media, but you don't see the people. You don't, I mean, like, we're on social media right now. I can't see a single one of you. I can see your names. That's why we always say, like, let StreamYard see who you are so that we can see, so I can see that you're really out there, that I'm not talking to myself or something. Interact with us. Because we can't see each other. And sometimes all we see is still pictures. Right? Or a snippet of a video that I want you to see.
Yeah.
Right?
We're very careful curating ourselves, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so those looser connections are even more loose, in my opinion, just because now I don't even go outside. I'm just in the house, really just on social media. All my friends are people that I have never met. Because I don't know how to communicate with people. So how do you, I mean, can that really relate in the neurodiverse way or not? I know it's not really, but
I feel like one of the things that learning more about neurodiversity, and one of the ways that we think about neurodiversity is autism, and autism is a spectrum. And some of the ways that parents of autistic people, teachers of autistic people have taught us about being aware of how differently people on all parts of the spectrum may communicate. There are some things that have taught us about, that have helped us in terms of social media. So the first thing, of course, is that because this is, in a sense, less emotional across a screen, that I may say something and I may mean it. I may be a bit sarcastic, but then maybe I'm sincere, or maybe my sarcastic question has some truth to it. I just don't know how to ask it in a less sarcastic way. Well, maybe you can type it and I would be able to read and understand it and just hear your question or your what you're saying, more than responding to your sarcasm or whatever emotion that you put in it. And that I say sarcasm, but it could be a positive emotion or a negative emotion or whatever it may be. But specifically, with counseling, nobody come to you to deal with their positive emotions. No. People come to deal with their negative emotions. So what happens when you can communicate with someone? Either they send you a video, right? I can send a video on Face Chat, WhatsApp, whatever, or I can type. And that lessens the emotional impact, both of me giving it to you and you giving it to me. I get a moment to think about it. I have to do it in real time. And these are things that we've learned from dealing with autistic people who are less verbal, for example, but even those who are high functioning autistic, we used to call it Asperger's. As I understand it, many people don't use that term anymore. Right. But if I understand correctly, high functioning is a more appropriate term. If you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct. Yeah.
And even then, people talk about the so-called flat emotions, or they don't express their emotions. Now we know that they actually have emotions. They have an entire emotional world and can perceive other people's emotions, but connecting is what to do or how to so-called appropriately respond both to their own emotions and the other person's emotions. This is where social media is both a hindrance and a help. I mean, in some ways, as I said, it can remove that immediate emotional impact of the intensity of whatever you're saying or what's being said to you. But at the same time, which allows us more communication, right? It allows us to say things that we perhaps wouldn't say. But then on the other side, just as you mentioned, do we become too careful and we only say what we think is right, what's appropriate, what we know will be permanent? Yeah. Like if I put something on my Facebook page, the world sees it, right? The many people that are in my page see it. Even if it's just my friends and family, it's there and everyone's seen it. I can't take it back. I can erase it. I can delete it now. Luckily, Because I think for a young person, remember you and I grew up, there are no videos. There are nearly as many videos, right? There were no mobile phones when we were teenagers. We didn't have digital anything except MP3s and Napster. And that came along when we were, almost adults.
Yeah.
So we have the benefit of making mistakes or living in real time. And so there's some differences in how this social media is and allowing us to communicate. But then also a lot of people have asked, are we starting to communicate more like people on the spectrum?
That's what I was getting to of like my thoughts, because how you were explaining, like the emotions are taken out of it. Like I could text Damon, right, and just say, like, let the dogs out, because I'm gonna be late or something. Just let the dogs out. There's no emotion in that, but I could be yelling, like if we were in the house, I could just be like, let the dogs out, and frustrated because they're barking or whatever. But when there's a text, because I think I mentioned this before, I had like a client once, and it was a couple, and the wife was saying that her husband yelled at her, and I was like, on the text message. And so I don't know what you call that, but like writing etiquette, if I'm typing an email or something like that, writing etiquette suggests that if it's in all caps, that's like more emphasis on it. That's like yelling. That's before emojis, right? So
all caps is yelling. Come on, all caps is yelling.
Right. But what if I forgot, or I was going really fast and I didn't realize the all caps button was, or the shift, whatever, the upshift or whatever. Michelle said angry. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like it could, so in that sense, like those real emotions, those raw emotions are not really expressed, because it's just like, here's a sentence. And now really with texting and I was going to say that word, and email as well, people don't even, it's not grammatical. It's not correct in any kind of punctuation. It's like a long run-on sentence, you know what I mean? So I don't even really know what you're saying. Like, so it's not really sentences, commas, periods, any of that. So it's kind of very flat.
And you add to that the fact that until our generation, and we're Gen X.
I don't know.
A phone was a phone. We had phones, right? So a phone was for calling people. And we had other means of communication, but a phone was a phone. And we had email eventually. But before email, remember, we had letters. So for us...
What's a letter?
An email evolved from writing a letter. So then there's all that etiquette that we inherited with it. Dear someone, there is to be an introduction. First of all, there literally you have to say, dear somebody, hi somebody, something, and you have to close it. That's a letter. But then remember, think about LOL, OMG, all those terms that came from texting.
Right.
Literally from texting. LOL, OMG. I'm sure there are a few others, but OMG is the first one that I remember because we started to say OMG. But originally, this was
just a shortcut of a, like, oh my gosh, or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny is, like, older generations, I don't know, I think my mom's technically a baby boomer. So I remember I was typing LOL, not thinking about it. And she was like, I love you too. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I thought, now here, this, I know, Mama, you're on there, but for real, like, she's not, this was many years ago. So she wasn't really into texting the way that we, she calls and she picks up the phone and she talks to you. That's what she used her phone for, so she wasn't into texting. So, a lot of the older people, they were not into texting.
And they still prefer you just call them. Yeah.
Exactly. So when I'm typing LOL and then she's like, because I'm being sarcastic and funny, right? In my mind, in my communication. But I think even at this time, there wasn't emojis. You had to type in like a colon and a parenthesis kind of thing,
colon hash in parentheses. Yeah.
So I put LOL, and she was like, "I love you too," and I was like, "Why is she trying?" Like, I'm taking it some kind of way because the communication is not there. And I see Tanisha was, I think, back when we were talking about how that connection with the emotion and all of that in the communication wise and all that, she's saying that bothers her. And Tanisha, by the way, is a school counselor. So so she probably sees a lot of these neurodiverse situations, and I call it situations just because I want to really get into that, like with this, because we just said, are we really creating people to be more on a spectrum? Because when you think of what Asperger's, like, so it's not like Diepiriye was saying, it's not really, they don't call it Asperger's anymore. They changed the whole diagnosing manual so that it's just a spectrum. And so typically people that were with Asperger's or high functioning autism, it was like they didn't have really social cues. Like they didn't really emote as far as like emotion. They didn't share or quite get social gestures, like when you kind of like,
taking things literally.
Yes. Taking things literal. Things were very literal for them. Yeah. So when you think about that, right? Now we're talking about, we have this whole generations of kids that that's all they know is social media culture. That's all they know. They don't know. I mean, and Tanisha, I would love for you to chime in because you're with kids all day, like these younger generations at school. They don't know how to interact because of it. And I mean, I know that there's times in my life where I'm very animated all the time, but I can communicate best in writing. Like I have to take time to process stuff and I can write it out, and I could give you this letter, but at the same time, if I give you this letter and write out my true feelings, I've had time to really think about it. I could erase something or I could scratch it out, however that looks, right? But if we're in communication right now and I say something, it's done, and sometimes there's a lot of emotion with it, because I'm not on spectrum, I don't think, so there's a lot of emotion. But when you're dealing with people, like I think truly there are people that walk around that are on spectrum, very high functioning people, and we don't know because we always focus on, and I'm using, absolute words because it's real. And I don't like to use absolutes, but it's real. We always focus on the ones that are more low functioning. The people
or don't have the verbal skills,
right? Because that's what you think of. And so, like, remember we were talking about this in the car, the nerds.
Remember the language we used to have? Geeky people, awkward. We had so many weird, and it was us who was weird, right? It was society who was weird because they were all around us. They weren't weird. We just didn't.
We didn't have the words for it. So Tanisha is saying, yes, social media and texting stunts their social and communicative maturity. Yes.
Tanisha, is it Tanisha?
Tanisha.
What age group do you teach? What age group does she teach?
Let me tell you, my girl don't have to teach no more because she gets to be a full-on school counselor doing just school counseling. She doesn't. She did have to teach before, but I want to say it was middle school for some reason.
Oh, the hormonal ones.
Yes. But if you could tell us what grade, because I think your school is middle school. Middle school. Yeah.
And I my very first teaching when I taught English in Korea, I went there to teach in 1999 in the middle school, and I lasted 2 months. So I had to find another job. It was easier teaching kindergarten and adults than teaching middle school. And I did that for 2 years, and I absolutely loved it. But I mentioned that because now I teach at university, and I teach first-year students on up through masters. And master students can be adults of any age. but more typically my university students are traditional university age students, 19 years old, coming to university. And oh my gosh, even those guys, now think about it, the 19-year-olds now, and they've spent the past few years, formative years, in lockdowns, inconsistent education, back and forth, not knowing. And for them, these were really formative years. So for any young person, but specifically those who were, I would say between the ages of 5 and 20 during COVID, those were really formative years.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky enough that I could have some of my students, who could walk up to me after class and say, I see what you try to do there. You try to put us in groups. You try to get us to talk to each other. Thank you. It's hard. We're not used to it, but please do it. Some of them say things like, yeah, we want to mix with people. We just don't know how. We're not used to it. So I even asked them, hey, we're going to do group work. Do you want me to put you in groups, or do you want to just mix up? Or no, you put us in groups. You mix us up. You make us. And they ask us to physically force them. Now, the majority are resistant to it. Oh, we have to get up. Oh, we have to move. Oh, we have to talk to each other. Yeah. I'm asking your opinion, not what Google says, but what do you think about this? And that's another thing that I would wonder if Tanisha is familiar with, that they're so used to the texting communication is such that there's a right and a wrong. So that's that black or white thinking that relates to very much being on the spectrum. That there is it's very literal. I mean, all of those, we could go down the theory of mind list, and this is what you're getting. So I fully agree that this social media communication is teaching us to be judgmental, to be opinionated, and not in a sense to think critically. Because the other thing is, when we're talking face to face, I might say something off to you, but you can hear me, you can see me, and you can sense it. Does he mean it exactly that way, or is he saying something else? Could you be joking? Could you mean it sarcastically? Could there be more than what's said, on the surface?
Because there's also that nonverbal communication that happens. Yeah.
And that's a huge part of it. And I know that this is I can't overestimate when we say that nonverbal communication is the bulk of communication. Before all this, we could say at least 70% of communication was a nonverbal. It was the tone, the texture of your voice, the timbre, the before you said what you're going to say.
Okay. Here we go.
Here we go. All of that, the talking, the are you nervous? Are you comfortable as you're sitting there talking to me? Or are you uncomfortable? All these things we're noticing, even if we can't put words to it. Now, I say this because there is a spectrum, and I believe, as I understand it, am at another end of the spectrum, what we might call empaths. And so empaths, don't be fooled. They're just people who have the same senses that everyone else has, but they're super sensitive. The way that many people that we know now on the autistic spectrum can be super sensitive and get overwhelmed by a smell or light or some noise. I've known people who there's certain kinds of noises they just can't stand, high-pitched noises. So even the kind of music that we listen to. I know someone, we can listen to Sade and Anita Baker all day, but as soon as I put on Mariah Carey, the person's like, I hate your music. It's just higher pitched than a certain pitch is so excruciating that you literally insult the diva.
But that's what we're talking about, is those people are the ones that get overlooked because it's just like, what's wrong with you? It's like, because they're very normal functioning people, right? So, and when I say normal, I don't mean that in a slight way, but just, it's like what society deems as normal. And it's like, so what's wrong with you when you are just outside of what that looks like for me? Or
when you do get really irritated because there's an overstimulation, and so suddenly you were okay, but there's a baby crying 2 aisles over in the store, and now you can't function.
Yeah. No, for real. I'm just, and so when you're talking about being the empath, though, like, what does that look like?
So I would say the other end that is are people who would be called empaths, and we don't necessarily get overwhelmed by the stimulation. It's we really feel
it,
feel what other people feel, like literally feel what other people are experiencing. And so there's some tricks to it, because say, for example, you didn't grow up in an environment that valued emotionality. And there are lots of families that don't. I just happen to be in a family that can openly discuss emotional reality, that men in my family can cry or talk about their emotions. I was also raised in a Buddhist environment. So I literally went to discussion groups and people would talk about what's going on. You know, I had literally a state senator and a janitor in the same room, and we're talking about people's emotional worlds, and how to change that to be more positive, basically. But I would also say that just the generation before me, not anybody older, the older generation, they ain't got nothing to say about the emotional world. It was the stoic, you know, there was that traditional 50s dad kind of thing. So for the younger people who don't know, the 50s dad were people, even that's our grandparents' generation. Just for a sense of time. But the baby boomers generation started to shift more towards even talking about these things.
And see, I kind of feel, I think that's kind of like where I am. Like I'm more on that end of the spectrum as well, just because I'm very sensitive and intuitive to what is happening to people. Like, you know, like I can just sense it, and it's like, don't tell me ain't nothing wrong.
Yeah.
You know, because like you walk in and you just feel the energy. And like when you don't understand that, it can be overwhelming for you. When you don't know that that's what's going on with you. So hence where we come with the neurodiversity, because diverse, you know, across the plane, not just one end or the other. And you know, there is a mix of that, y'all. Let me see what's going on. So Tanisha's saying, yes, they struggle with critical thinking and thinking outside the box. Right.
Theory of mind, and frustrated, and then fight, flight, or freeze.
And shut down. Yep. Because then that's their survival mode is fight, flight, or freeze, you know, shutting down, whatever that looks like. And then she says she deals with a lot of high functioning spectrum learners, and they become overstimulated very easily. I know, you know, they're, you know, and sometimes like my daughter works with children that are she does IEP work in her school district. And so I think that's intellectual emotional plan or something. It's like the plans that the kids need for you know, to like if they need help with something, then those teachers are supposed to make sure that they get the extra assistance that's needed. And so some of them are behavioral and some of them are intellectual, right? So and if I said something wrong, I'm sorry, I'll correct it. But you know, so she, you know, we have discussion too about children that get thank you, individual. I was all
individual education. Keep it simple. It's much simpler than we thought.
It sounded like it should have been what I said. But so individual education plan. Thanks, Tanisha. That's why my girl is on there. Keep me straight. But you know, we talk about that of like the same thing. Recently we had conversation because you I can't think of what this word is. I've been trying to remember it all day, but you know, the people that are like little geniuses, like they call
the savants.
Savant, because I was like, it's like I thought it started with a P for something, but yeah, like a savant, right? So you could be dealing with this little genius, right? And it's like something's wrong with them, but it's nothing really wrong with them. They can be very empathic too, because they're also very high functioning, right? And so they feel everything that's around them, you know. They it just depends on this on the
They
spectrum.
experience
Experience it,
all
all
these
of it.
things. And it's like, well, what do you do with that emotion? And that's where we start to really define, well, okay, so what actually is empathy? One of the definitions of empathy that I like is from Simon Baron Cohen. He's a neurologist. He's Borat's cousin, Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin. He's a Cambridge University neurologist who studies the brain, who studies empathy from actually how it's wired in the brain. And one of the things that he defines, one of the ways that he defines it is that it's, it's the intuitive, it's the understanding people's emotions, but also responding. Those two things go together. Not just that you can sense others' emotions, but you have a response that meets those. And that's why I think that the difference, this is the only difference between someone on the autistic spectrum and and I don't know how to speak about it, whether it's another kind of spectrum to say, or if it's if it's the same spectrum, because we're all human, but really experiencing how to respond to someone else's emotions. And so one of the things that I find that as I grow in understanding myself more and how powerful it is to be able to understand emotions. I've always known it was powerful, even as a kid, because I sense that there are people who who could get me, and you could feel yourself being closer to them. And your sense how to protect yourself. When you need to come after somebody. You can do that too with their emotions. And I remember the first time I made a classmate cry, and I thought, oh my gosh, I never want to do that again, but he deserved it. But I never want to do that again. But think about what you said. You walk into a room or you're meeting with someone and they're saying, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And you clearly see this person is not fine. I like in that movie, Moonlight, Janelle Monáe's character, she's like, I've seen fine, I've seen okay, and you are not it. And I end up using that phrase a lot because I find that it helps people to say, I see you, I care about you. I'm not trying to call you out. I'm not trying to expose you. I just want you to know that I can see that you're not fine. And that's dangerous.
That was one of the things, and I know y'all, it's getting late, but we'll keep talking. But if y'all need to go, finish up. Catch the replay, remember that you're at 47 minutes. So you don't have to watch the whole thing again. But if you want to, that's okay. But I, in counseling, I always talk to people and I tell them, like, when I ask you how you're doing, I really mean, how are you doing? Because in these looser connections that we have with people, and some of them that are even a more intimate connection with people, they don't really want to hear how we're doing, because again, we're creating this environment that I only want to know the good stuff. I want to know that you went to Paris. I want to know that you you got this new Birkin bag or whatever. I want to know all that good stuff. I don't want to know that you were sad and depressed and your dog got ran over. I don't care about that. I want to know all the highlights, And so when they come in, I tell them that. And it's one of the things as a therapist that I really, like when I said, one day when I'm a therapist and I grow up, I'm going to be like this. It's something that was really hard for me. Like, you go to the therapist and they say, like, how does that make you feel? I didn't get it as the patient, before learning all this. And it's such a turnoff to me. So I was like, I'm never going to ask them that. But really, it's important because I want to know what your emotional intelligence is. Where are you? Because just because something makes a typical person angry doesn't mean that it's going to make you angry. Or if that's really not anger, it's just frustration. Like, I need to know what your emotional intelligence is. And, a problem with empathy is like what they teach us. I don't know how they taught you, because you went to a nicer school than me. But at good old Troy, what they taught us, I
studied something different.
Right. You did really, right? So psychology, they taught us like, I think okay, let me put this right. can I teach someone to have empathy?
Mm.
You know what I mean? So they were telling us to be empathetic, but then you're supposed to still be genuine and authentic, right? So if I'm not really empathetic, it doesn't come across as genuine and authentic. That's just my thought. You know, I don't know if that's real or imagined, but it's mine. And hey, coach, but I'm just wondering, like, can you really teach somebody to be have empathy? So they taught us how to respond empathetically, right? Which is I'm sorry that you're going through that. You know, that must be difficult for you. And I'm like, hell yeah, it's difficult. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm crying. Like, what do you mean? And so that was very frustrating for me because I didn't like that. But I did have my favorite teacher. Well, two of them. They told me, like, no, don't do that. Because it wasn't genuine and authentic for me just to be like, oh, wow. Like, because it's like, I'm really sitting here like, oh, wow, that must be really hard for you. And very stoic, there's no emotion attached to it. So is that real empathy? And so then there's that cross between the compassion, and I heard you talking about that when you first came on, of, you know, there's a difference between compassion and empathy. But I think in theory, we need to have a little bit of both. Like, they have to be, like, I don't think truly, genuinely they can exist one without the other. Empathy means I don't have to experience what you're going through. I don't have to, I just need to be able to understand it. Right? That's how they taught it to us. Like, I just need to understand it and just validate that your stuff is real for you.
Yes. And I think for a lot of people who are in what we say doing emotional labor, what you definitely do, what teachers do differently, emotional labor for young people, is that we have to remind ourselves that empathy can also, we don't want to get souped into a black hole.
Right.
And I think for a lot of empaths, that's one of the dangers that people fear is if you're not aware of yourself as an empath, and so you're not aware that you need to do some recovery. And for a lot of empaths, it literally means I need to remove myself from a lot of stimulation for a few hours or a day or two, because I've been overstimulated as well. That you can really get swooped into that. And I would, as I understand it, and people who work with counseling, that because you are so regularly confronted with people's most negative emotions, that as part of your own self-care, I think it's a reason why counselors are required to be in counseling as well. Because of that, because we fully understand our humanity, right?
Absolutely. Right. Because who do you really let it off to? Like, who do you get to talk to? And, you know, I know that this is way off, but a little while back, I was looking at suicide rates, and one of the things that I found on research was, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, that veterinarians or like veterinary techs have one of the highest suicide rates. And so if you think about that, yes, it's not a person, you know, but they have to euthanize animals. And so that compassion, that empathy, that all the, you know, you understand this animal has gone through X, Y, and Z, whatever, you're trying to save it, you know, and then think about how many animals get euthanized every day, you know, because
and these are animals that are typically that are cared for animals,
right?
Beloved pets,
right?
Not just
the dog that
not hunting dogs. You know, but
right.
But these are truly animals that we know someone has cared for,
because they're dropping them off. You know, or maybe at a
or maybe that you've seen them for years as your in your
clinic,
yeah.
Or you know, maybe at the Humane Society where they're just lost out their dogs. That, because you know, you hear about people just dropping the dogs off, open the door, let them out, you know. And so when you think about stuff like that, you know, do you teach people to have, you know, and this is an animal, You know, and I'm saying just an animal, but if something happened to my dog, like, you know, I didn't shelled out some money for my little baby downstairs, you know, because she has diabetes. And some people are like, that don't even make sense. You know,
Fido will be gone.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, but also it's like, it's hard, you know, as an empathic person, just to experience, you know. So that's why it's so important to get help, to talk to people, to recognize that might be you. And if that is you, like, you know, if you go into spaces like that, like you can recognize, like, you know, have you ever been like where it just feels like, ooh, the tension up in here, right?
Yes.
And it's just like, it's thick, you know. Yeah. I say that all the time, but you know, like,
because you can read the room,
right? And you know, and not to boast on myself, but seriously, like, whenever, like, at my office, right, even my old office, there was a lot, like, you walk in the door and it was kind of like, you know, but then when people would come all the way down the hall to my office, they're like, wow, it's so peace and calm because of my own light, you know what I mean, of my own energy. Like, I try to make sure it's cleansed, you know, because it's so important for me. So even now that I have this small office, it's intimate, it's a loving environment, it's not really a harsh environment. So when people do come in, they do feel welcome, they do. And I think that sometimes you have to be aware of that for yourself, like, what is your energy?
What is your energy? And oftentimes, and you know, to go back to what you were saying, how much of this can you teach? How much empathy can you teach?
Yeah.
So people talk about cognitive empathy and affective empathy, and certainly anything that's cognitive, we can at least teach you to practice. Like you said, I can teach someone to respond empathetically. I remember that the therapist, the family therapist I mentioned that I interviewed for my dissertation, she gave one of these techniques. She's like, listen, just read the room. Like, literally, when in doubt, take a deep breath and just go from person to person and say, how is this person doing? How are they physically? Where just literally just take a moment to just read the room. Is anyone breathing heavily or slowly? Is everyone sweating or freezing? You know, are they responding to something in the environment? Just to observe and to make yourself aware of what are people's emotional states. So I think it's really important that we think in this way, that we can teach people to respond empathically. Right. Now, that is different from
actually being
effective.
Yeah.
And I've come to accept that that's fine.
Right.
That's fine, because because we do want to get the intention there that you do want to be able to connect with people. So if you want to connect with people, then, and including, I'm not just talking about the loose connections. Maybe you do want to just have an easier time with the people that you interact with along the way. But then also, we do value our friendships. We do value our family connections. And if we know that either we're going to not be around people, or if we are, then we have to do some things to make things better.
Right.
And one of the things that we know, and this is, again, as Simon Baron-Cohen says, is that empathy is like a universal salve. Anything immersed in it will become just better. Anything immersed in empathy is better. So it's like a universal salve, right? I have just solvent, anything that just you can put it anywhere, and instantly empathy is better.
Like Vicks Vapor Rub.
Like Vicks Vapor Rub, it just opens you up. And so you can imagine that, okay, so I learned I can teach anyone to say, when you interact with anyone that you're interacting with, and this is something for you students, Miss Davidson. Anyone can genuinely take off their earbuds, put away their phone, and pay for whatever it is you're paying for. That person who's taking your money in the grocery store, at the post office, I know you don't send letters no more, or even on customer service, even if you're on the phone, do that. Just take the 2 or 3 minutes it takes to just be present for that. one of the things that I find really odd now is that it is normal that someone's like half on their phone having a conversation. Wait a minute, I have to pay for this. Well, why not just hang up the phone and just take the 2 minutes it takes for you to pay for
something that you want
or
need.
And why not just be present for that?
Yeah.
Maybe even if that's somewhere that you go regularly, hi. Mm-hmm. If you see them a third time, how are you today? That's it. You're not trying to make best friends, but you are trying to make happy, and that really matters. And you don't have to believe me. These are things you can actually test for yourself. Like, you don't have to just take me on my word for it. Test it.
And I love that, because I actually try to practice that, but like, especially because if grocery stores is Walmart checkout used to be, because now you gotta do it yourself.
They don't pay us to do it.
Right. But that, I would always make an effort to like speak to those people, say something, because now I'm going back to mental health, and then I guess we can try to wrap up, because this is gonna be late. But I try to speak to the people and just be like, hey, and say something. Even I could care less, I'd be like, I love your hair. Like, that is so cute. Like, I will find something, because I don't want to lie, but I will find something. Yes. Like, oh my gosh, that's a neat shirt. What does it say? Yeah. And just read
something. And don't lie. Find something.
Right. Yeah.
Don't lie.
Yeah. Because some of those things are just what people need, just to feel present in the world, to feel like somebody cares. I literally was at Piggly Wiggly on New Year's Day. So this Sunday. I don't ever go to Piggly Wiggly, but this girl, she was on her phone. She didn't want to be there. And, I had to go in her line, right? And then she was like, why you come in my line? You know what I mean? And so then I was like, oh my gosh, I like your braids, Yeah. And then she was like, for real, thank you, And then she was like, I like your nails. And I was like, I don't like the blue, And I felt good, she felt good, but my intent wasn't to be like, give me a compliment back. It was, I could see that she was just like, I don't want to be here. My life sucks. All of that. Like, I was feeling like I didn't even want to go in the line, because it was so like the energy there,
You feel that energy,
yeah. But then it turned into a positive experience. Tanisha says, most of my learners just want that attention.
Yes. Yes. I'm telling you, at night, if I'm teaching 19-year-olds and I'm having to pick up that for them, like, wait a minute, these are things that you should have gotten, and that you should now be able to offer to each other. But I'm like, okay, so that's the job. So here we are, and I have to teach them. It's okay to do that. And one thing that I know, as I would say that I specifically, to go back to your example, because I love that. I know that as a Black man, the women, really Black, and the women around me, especially, we are in such from my perspective, I'll just speak for myself. I can perceive that we're in a world that has a lot of anti-Blackness. And it has a lot of if we use words like patriarchy, then patriarchy is what it is. Then a lot of the anti-Blackness and, women, focusing on gender, women are the ones who have to be perfect. Women are the ones who are supposed to be beautiful. Women are the ones who are supposed to have it together. Women are the ones who are supposed to represent the family. All these things. I could, as a sociologist, I could go really deep into it and talk about caste in India and how the very same thing looks on women's bodies in caste. But just think about here. So for me, I decided probably just 20 years ago that I would, if I ever encountered a Black woman whose hair that I thought, oh, that's nice, I would just say it. I just don't have any, I really like your hair. Because why not? But specifically, as a Black man with Black women in my family, I want the Black women around me to be very validated. I don't want people to be seeking validation outside of something that's fraternal.
Right.
that, you know, I can love on your hair and I don't need to try and get with you. I don't need your number. I'm just saying I love your hair, and you should learn to expect that. And you don't have to put out anything.
Right. You know, I was buying some gifts, and it was at this soap shop, new soap shop in Columbus, y'all, Buff City. But anyway, the guy, he was buying some gifts for his coworkers. He's a male. I guess all of his coworkers are female, and because he said he was a nurse. He said, like, he was really concerned. Well, like, he was just like, I want to get this. I want to get something. I'm looking for something specifically for this person, that person. So the male that worked there, he was like, well, is it like a coworker, like somebody you like coworker? You know, he was like asking all these questions. And he said, because you don't want to get something that smells too good where they think you're trying to say this thing, or that you're trying to get with them and all that. So it's kind of, see, even society tells us, like, and he was like, I didn't even think about that. But you know, our social norms also create, like, he was just trying to buy gifts. Gifts. But people can take it the wrong way, you know, and I know we're like probably way off. But
no, of course people do. And we have to be, I think it's why a lot of, because I'm a gay man, so I realize that for many people, I visibly, like, people can see that I'm gay. So when I compliment a woman, usually women don't think I'm trying to hit on them. And to be honest, I probably compliment men differently who are not gay. I wouldn't say, ooh, I love those shoes. I would say this to another gay man, but I wouldn't walk up to some dude and be like, dude, those. But actually, dudes do that to each other.
Like, where you get them J's?
I know. That's what people say to my husband, because he wears those anyway. Apparently, Yeezys, or are those some kind of shoes? Anyway, he wears some kind of shoes that we got in Vietnam. But anyway, apparently, guys walk up to him on the street. Hey, dude, where you get them? Hey, you shouldn't be wearing them. Right. Dudes be like, you shouldn't be wearing them. I was like, what does that mean? Straight man says that. And I mean, I say all this to say that part of what social media has done to us is that we have made it so that we're not comfortable expressing emotions, receiving emotions, including compliments, just giving and receiving compliments. And so I do challenge you, all of our listeners, you know, be Southern. We're here the South. I'm telling you, I did my master's in New Orleans, and outside of whatever I learned in the classroom, what I remember are the women who called me baby. Baby. I mean, just hearing that word at the Walgreens, walking down the street, or, you know, and it's like, I might be in this little ivory tower, but I'm definitely in a black town. Yeah. And that was so warming to me. So I've always wanted to be that one person. I do challenge you guys to do it too. We talk about taking care of our own mental health and being aware that other people, we've just talked about the holidays. How many people die over the holidays? We know that even suicide rates go up, let alone other kinds of death, isolation, depression, what we're supposed to do, what a perfect Christmas is supposed to be like. And if it's anything less and we're depressed around that, reach out for each other. Don't wait for someone to reach out for you. Just reach out to people. But even in your immediate environments, just let people know how much you appreciate who they are, how they are. Thank you. I like how you did that, sis. You know, that's a really nice, you're really working it today. And we have language around this. So don't be afraid to use it. As a teacher, again, I know that there are fine lines that we have, you and your clients, certainly me and my students, my students and I, I also realize that I'm building up their confidence. Yeah. That's a huge part of what any teacher is doing, is building their confidence. If you're working with young people, that's part of your role, in case you didn't know that. And so I do let them know that I appreciate the way that they communicate, talk, say what they say, but also how they look, how they, you know, because they put effort into it. And this is, remember, these are people who've been locked down back and forth for years. So being face to face is now really, people understand and appreciate it a lot more.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add something. I want to add to what he's saying. Not even if you're just working with young children or students, but if you have a young child in your life, a niece, a nephew, a cousin, a godchild or whatever, a little kid next door, that stuff is still very important to do as well. Just to, I mean, we do it all the time here, but just because we really are those kind of people, just like, hey, like, we see them out there playing and just, oh, you got a new bike, they like that stuff. How Tanisha was saying, they like that attention because you don't know what they're really going through at home, truly. And you're teaching them communication, you're teaching them empathy, compassion, you're teaching them all of that stuff, how to communicate, how to receive,
if you are a neighbor, you are an adult in that child's life.
Yeah.
Even as just a hi and bye neighbor, even that hi and bye is teaching them you should say hi and bye to people.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because it's so important. It is the people who work with young people, but let's face it, all of us are in families. Inevitably, we will be around young people, and that is always on my mind, that any interaction you have with a young person it's their first time. It is like, this is all brand new for them. So of course, I don't want to put us all in warning, but yeah, we do need to be more aware of our behavior when there are young people present.
Yeah.
But it also means that I do think that we need to be more forward. It's something I really appreciate about the adults in my life. I had a lot of, I come from a large family, of course, but I also went to a liberal school growing up and was in a lot of different after school activities and summer activities. So I just got a lot of mentorship, a lot of good mentorship. I mean, shout out to University of Louisville sports program. I have zero interest in sports, but I did a summer sports program, and even the adults, the mentorship, they knew that they were building us. They were just exposing us. They weren't trying to make any football players, basketball players out of us, baseball players out of us. They knew that we were spending the summer building these kids up, and sports happens to be this year's vehicle. I did a journalism program one year. I did an engineering program one year. In addition, there are so many enrichment programs specifically for urban youth. So just, I think if there's anything, and I'm aware of the time, I think we want to wrap up now. Yeah. But
because y'all got to get back on the road and head home.
Head back to Alabama.
Horrible. We're in Alabama.
Oh yeah, sorry.
We just
we're
went
on the
back
border.
and forth to Georgia just a moment ago, but yeah. But so in a nutshell, like we talked about neurodiversity, empathy, compassion. We talked about a lot, but what are your final words or something that you would want to sum it up for people?
Can I say two things?
No,
one of them is, I one of the people that I really appreciate who writes and talks a lot about this is Bell Hooks. I can't say enough about her, fellow Kentucky native. And she introduced me to the guru of mindfulness. Her writing introduced me to Thich Nhat Hanh, who gave us that word mindful, literally. And he has a question. Do I understand you enough? Do I understand you enough? When in doubt, as opposed to if you think you're about to say something sharp or come back, or what do you mean, or do you mean this? Take a deep breath, first of all, and ask, do I understand you enough? Even if you mean, do I understand you? Right. You just say it, let the words get out.
Do I? Yeah.
Yes, do I? And then ask it again if you're really not feeling it, but give the person the chance to answer. And that's something I would just want to put out there into the world. And then the last one is, of course, I wore this t-shirt on purpose. Come to Montgomery, Alabama, to the Equal Justice Initiative's museum started by, as I understand it, Brian Stevenson. And he has a few T-shirts that the museum has, but this one I think speaks to all of us. Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the worst thing we've ever done. And I think oftentimes in families or people, when we have relationships that can go way back, we can talk about or joke about something you did 20, 30, 40 years ago as the worst thing you've done. But that's not the worst. That's not who you are now. And we really want to, even when we talk about or bring up those things, want to allow each other our growth and acknowledge each other's growth. That's something I appreciate about getting to know you at this stage in our lives, and of course your husband. You know, knowing him
he was little.
knowing him since we were boys, since we were kids together, and seeing the emotionally intelligent man that he's grown into. Because of course, he is more of a man's man than I am, comparatively. You know, he's into sports and physical things, but he's always had that side, and I love that you two have your own journey. Have your own journey. It's that. So.
You're welcome for me. I'm kidding. No, Demonte, I love him. So he's, it has been a journey. But I just want to add into here about, just be open to people. My mama's talking about get her one, get her a shirt. So you have been, Tanisha. Yes, we've been. I love it. I think all people need to go. They all have humans. To update, and we've gone more than once, but they've made some updates and changes too, I heard. So, please go. But, about the neurodiversity thing, just don't look at somebody as being like something's wrong with them, but what Diepiriye just said from Thich Nhat Hanh, am I understanding you? Because maybe something's not wrong with them. Maybe something wrong with you, and that's the negative connotation. It's there, however we all fit onto the spectrum, like, whatever that normal range is, you might be there. If you're in this high functioning area over here, or if you're in a low functioning area, we're still all on that. And we need to have empathy one for another, and just be understanding and compassionate towards what people have going on. Because, who's really right? Did the egg come first or the chicken? And
we know that we want to live here together. So give each other our space.
And so before we go, final words. What is one thing? Because one thing that you do to be intentional each day?
Dance.
Yes, y'all. He really he danced for real all the time. He makes videos of him dancing.
I do.
So,
and because it makes me feel good, dance and sing. And I know I have to, especially if I have morning classes where I'm not a morning person. So I don't want to bring my natural energy to class. So I have to bring my pump up the jam energy, warm up my voice. Yeah. So I don't walk in class sounding like I just, I didn't wake up like this. And so, no, you see how my edges are laid. So music really, really makes me feel good. And I think it's important to feel good, to try to feel good. We don't just naturally, sometimes I'm low, but to put that out there in the world and what I want to put out there in the world, I need to give myself some air, some breath. So music. Yeah.
I love it. And I have to listen to music regularly, like uplifting music.
Yes, uplifting music.
Not some nuck if you buck, because then I'll be ready, like, let's go. But yeah, because I'll be ready to fight. But
sometimes there's a time for that too.
Yeah, there is. But it has been such a pleasure having you Dr. Cousin.
Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this for so long.
Yeah,
I'm really happy you do this. Thank you.
And you guys, follow him. How can people follow you?
Yes, I'm Dr. Kuku Straight Talk on the gram. That's Dr. DRKUKU STR and the number 8 talk. Dr. Kuku Straight Talk.
How you put straight talk?
Dr. Kuku Straight Talk. STR8.
No,
Talks.
I was trying to see. I was being sarcastic.
Oh.
Anyway, you guys, this has been long
and on TikTok.
And on TikTok.
Yes, Dance for Love to Grow on TikTok.
Dance
for Love to Grow.
Oh, I like that. Dance for Love. See, I'm
4 and 2.
I'm not on TikTok for real unless Anthony sends it to me.
I would have thought of it. I should have simultaneously cast us.
Well, you can still, I think. But anyway.
I got to get your Wi-Fi password first.
Anyway, y'all, this has been fun. I apologize because I know I said we were doing something else and we had a whole, be flexible, right? In life, be flexible, let things happen, and embrace that change, whatever that is for you. But we will talk about words, goals, and intentions, or however I wrote it on there, coming up. So just stay with us. Don't miss out on the tea each and every Tuesday unless something happens, but I'll let y'all know. And right now, I am here. It is now. And y'all, we are alive. So y'all be good. Happy New Year. And thank you for joining in tonight. Be blessed.
Be lit in 2023.
Yes, lit 2023 all year long.